Hello there. This is Connor with Exploring Lore. I'm joined today by Joe, the founder of Kefefi House, a great online publication with commentary and entertainment that you should definitely check out. We're here today to talk about the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, kind of our pre-finale review, what we think of the show up to this point, and kind of what we're hoping for the final episode as it's quickly approaching. So far, I obviously the show does, of course, have its flaws. It's not perfect, and some of the commentary online has been spot on. Some hasn't, but overall, I've been really enjoying it. I think it's been striking good balance between a lot of things, and it's an interesting story.
So, I mean, full disclosure, I'm a total prequel fan of Star Wars. My first Star Wars movie was The Phantom Menace. And I'm really just in love with the prequels. So that's sort of my Star Wars trilogy. So obviously, I have fantasized about an Obi-Wan standalone show for quite some time. Just seeing Ewan back in the saddle as Obi-Wan honestly just makes this whole thing a win in and of itself. I think kind of similar to the prequel trilogy, the thing I find sort of most compelling about the show is Ewan McGregor's actual performance as Obi-Wan. I think he does show his level of sort of depth. I mean, the scenes of him getting to see Anakin again as Vader for the first time were chilling, probably some of the best moments in all of the Star Wars canon. I think, yeah, like you said, there are some flaws with it, flaws that still could be corrected in this final episode. I feel like it's perhaps a bit too episodic. I think it might have been better if it was one sort of more complicated story. I think that, with the whole rescue episode, to me, it felt like they were just sort of cribbing, the Mandalorian's homework, which is, it's fine, you know what I mean? But in some ways, you almost feel like young Leia is just like the new baby Yoda. And you almost wish they could have gotten some better screenwriters to just make something a little bit more dynamic. But overall, I'm very satisfied with the series. I think that, for me, a lot of people in our age cohort, there's just this level of sort of nostalgia and excitement and just inherent awesomeness about seeing Ewan as Obi-Wan once again.
That's a good point, and yeah, it's funny you bring up the prequels because obviously this is definitely, without a doubt, a spiritual successor to the prequels, and it's almost like as great as the prequels were, and I agree. They could have also used another go through with the script at points, a little bit tighter writing. So in that sense, it's kind of very appropriate that we do have a little bit of loose writing here and there because it is almost more reminiscent of the prequels.
It speaks to the spirit of the prequels for sure.
And yeah, the Darth Vader scene that he obviously was having his like hallucinations or force visions or whatever it was of Anakin beforehand, and I like the little touch that he was seeing him as pre Darth Vader Anakin, or at least before the suit, because obviously he's never seen him in the suit, so that's the kind of vision he would have of him. But then the scene where he actually sees him for the first time on that planet where they're, that underground railroad for the Jedi, that, Disney has had its big ups and downs as they've interpreted the Star Wars franchise from their point of view. But one thing I think they do really well is make Darth Vader look scary and intimidating. Like that scene was great. Like him just breaking the guy's neck and just awful.
Yeah, I mean, it was sick, right? Just seeing him snapping people's necks, walking with a purpose, trying to find Obi-Wan, who he hates probably more than any other person in the galaxy. And just knowing too, as a prequel fan, that's Hayden in the suit. It hits different. It really hits different.
Yeah, that's a good point because we obviously have Ewan McGregor return, and that's the real draw of the series. It's like, yeah, we would love to see him again. More memes, more Ewan McGregor action. That was definitely a draw. But I really love that they took the time to get people back. Hayden Christensen being one of them. But then there's so many other characters. Uncle Owen, the same actor who played him, and then Obviously, the guy who played Bail Organa coming back into the role and actually having a chance to be a little bit of a father figure, which we haven't seen yet, which was so cool to see. And they could have recasted those people so easily, especially the guy playing Uncle Owen, because since the prequel trilogies, he's actually become, a recognizable actor in his own right. So I imagine, he had a choice in doing this, but everyone wanted to return, and the Star Wars wanted to have them back, and I think that's just really cool to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I always say, Tamora Morrison was the luckiest guy ever when he was casted to play, 200,000 roles and 2 million more on the way in the prequels. I love that he made a cameo in the show as well as a sort of homeless clone veteran. That was, really chilling. And I think that was a little slice of life of the Star Wars universe that I think we all sort of needed to see. Because the Empire really kind of, excuse my language, they really screwed over, we'll say. They screwed over the clones as they switched over to the Stormtrooper model. And the sort of economic hardships that befell the clones who had given so much, to the cause, who actually executed Order 66 that put Palpatine into full, unlimited power, were just cast aside. So I think it's a really jarring shot of the cruelty of the Empire, but also obviously some sort of social commentary, I'm sure. But yeah, Tamora Morrison being back a lot is great. I will note that Bail Organa did show up, I believe, in Rogue One. So it's not the first time we've seen him in the Star Wars canon, at least the Disney canon. I like to ask you, so in the finale, it's very long. Two characters who I think may make an appearance. I want to hear your take. First, obviously, Qui-Gon Jinn. They teased it in the first episode. I feel strongly that we're going to see Liam Neeson return in the role of Qui-Gon. But before I turn it over to you, the second character I would like to flag is Ahsoka. Disney has another Ahsoka series coming out. Ahsoka has been pretty active as Rosario Dawson, who I think is excellent as Ahsoka. In Mandalorian, and I think we see her in Book of Boba Fett as well. She's getting a standalone show. She's mentioned in the first episode briefly when you have this sort of Jedi who the Inquisitors are hunting down on Tatooine, and he says, "You'll never find Ahsoka," right? So they've sort of hinted at her. I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Do you think we get to see Qui-Gon Jinn, and do you think Ahsoka makes a cameo?
So before the show started, I was kind of 50-50 on whether Liam Neeson was going to return. But the fact that they hinted towards it, and I think it was the opening episode, or at least the second episode, him trying to commune with them. Now I'm 80% sure that he's going to show up, because they wouldn't hint that, they wouldn't foreshadow it unless it was going to happen, because they know that it would just disappoint fans too much if they were foreshadowing it and it didn't happen. So I went from 50% he's going to show up to 80%, and obviously we have one episode left, so I think he's going to return in kind of a turning point type of way, where Obi-Wan is kind of nearing the end of this lesson he has to learn. He's been making progress from being this hopeless hermit, which makes sense because of the trauma he went through, to actually being an active participant in his own story. And I think that development makes a lot of sense, but he's not quite there yet. And I think Liam Neeson coming as a Force Ghost is going to be that kind of, he's going to say something just simple, something very Jedi-like, something simple, something very obvious, but very, very, very balanced and very correct. And it's going to be that little reminder for Obi-Wan to finally bridge that gap between who he's supposed to be and really take control of his destiny and his character. Ahsoka, I'm much less sure. So obviously she has been appearing in a bunch of stuff, and for good reason. As you mentioned, they're going to be doing a standalone show of her, which I'm really excited about. But I also think that they're probably also conscious of character fatigue as well, where it made sense for her to show up in the Book of Boba Fett, because she was in the episodes with Mandalorian, and they already have that connection. I think even though she is very much a prequel character, she comes from the Clone Wars and all that stuff. I think that they're probably going to keep her in the kind of post Return of the Jedi era, that 5 to 6 years that that the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett has been taking place in. I think they're going to keep her in that time period, but I could be wrong. She's obviously active at this point. We know from Rebels that she is kind of tangentially involved with the or what would become the rebellion. So she's around. She could show up, but with one episode left, and no real foreshadowing that she would appear, I think that she's not.
I'd have to agree, but I don't know. I mean, I guess they're going to save it for the Ahsoka series, depending on when that's set. But I mean, I know they did it in Rebels, but it would just mean the world to me to see a live action, sort of confrontation between Ahsoka and Vader. I know it's going to be a while, but like the reunion between, I mean, frankly, the whole sort of Jedi family of Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin / Vader, and Ahsoka, if they were somehow able to pull that off on screen, it's just like, it'd be the craziest family reunion I've seen in some time. Put it that way.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't complain if they did that, especially if they handled it in a good way. So I wouldn't complain. I also like you bring up the Tamala Morrison homeless clone trooper scene. That is the pure definition of how to do fan service right. It really didn't have anything to do with the story, but it did help Obi-Wan's character, I think. So that's where it's not just a throwaway scene. I think it could be interpreted a bunch of different ways because they have that moment where they're looking at each other. On the very literal surface, what's not above interpretation, or what is above interpretation, is that the very fact that that Obi-Wan gave credits to him shows a lot of grace and a lot of humility and knowledge of the situation, because he has every right to hate that man for probably being involved in some massacres, and considering the markings on his uniform seemed to indicate he was part of the 501st Legion. He was probably, right there at the temple or some other place, just killing Jedi. So Obi-Wan had every chance. So he showed a lot of grace and humility, which was very Jedi of him. He saw a person down in his luck and he helped him. But at the same time, he also looked kind of scared of him, which is interesting. It's like he did the right thing, but you could tell that he was nervous. Like this homeless guy was about to just spring into action and recognize him and just go mental again. So it either tells me that that Obi-Wan is just that good a person, or somewhere along the lines someone did tell him about the inhibitor chips and that he knows it's not the clone's fault. Either way, it shows great character from him. What I think is kind of up to interpretation is whether the trooper recognized him, because he did have kind of a knowing look, but he also looked kind of tired, like a homeless person would. So it was hard to tell, but presumably if he was part of the 501st, he probably saw, at least, if not met, Obi-Wan. He probably knows what he looks like. So did he just not recognize him, or did he recognize him, but at this point the inhibitor chip is just too worn or whatever, or whatever the reason is? I don't know. I think it's very interesting. I was wondering when I saw that scene whether the clone recognized him.
I think it's left to interpretation. I'm going to go with probably not. That's probably not the impression I had, that he recognized Obi-Wan. But it's just so hard to say. I mean, you got to remember, these guys are both veterans, and they both served in a really horrific war. Like I can't really imagine what it was like to fight in the actual Clone Wars. And I think that, at some level there might be a cognitive dissonance of, a the clones understood Obi-Wan to be dead, so they might just think, oh, this kind of looks like a worse version of him. um they believe they killed him, right? I mean, that was the impression they had. And I think there's just some sort of, nostalgia. But I think the way the inhibitor chip works, I mean, if he had recognized a Jedi, it would have been an involuntary reflex, right? And I think the odds that this particular clone seems to be down on his luck had his inhibitor chip removed are unlikely. So my bet is that he didn't recognize Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan certainly recognized him because they all look the same.
Yeah. It's like that joke in The Mandalorian when they're trying to break into the Imperial Remnant's base, and he's like, to more Boba Fett's character is like, I probably shouldn't be the one that goes in there. They probably have my face on file. So yeah, and then also a good point about him kind of being the most lucky actor in Star Wars. I'm glad, before he gets too old and stuff. He's obviously a lot older than he was during the prequel era, and it kind of, you had to use a little bit of imagination during the Boba Fett series and pretend that his shoulders weren't as broad, and you had to use a little bit of imagination. But at this point, I'd take it over leaving it. I'm so glad they're finding opportunities for him to play to play different clones. Boba Fett, now we actually see a trooper. I'm hoping we get Rex at some point. Rex is actually someone.
Just gonna say that.
Yeah, Rex is actually someone he can play pretty well, because when we see Rex in Rebels, he is broad shoulders and older. So I would love to see that. But luckiest actor in Star Wars. I hope we see a lot more of him, and I bet Rex is going to be in the Ahsoka series.
I would love that. I mean, so Dave Filoni has actually said in an interview that in his own personal head canon, there's this older gentleman who fights in the Battle of Endor, this big bushy beard, kind of like Rex in Rebels. And he said in his own head canon that he thinks that Rebel is Rex. And so, I mean, Dave Filoni's head canon has a habit of becoming actual, Star Wars canon. So I would absolutely, and I mean, I think we've all been itching for that.
Yeah, I think I didn't kind of Disney itself, like corporate Disney, actually allude to that. Like after Dave Filoni said that, they kind of were like, yeah, sure. So I think at this point it's kind of canon that is supposed to be Rex, or at least some clone. Either way, yeah, you're right. His imagination has a tendency to become canon. So if it's not canon yet, I think it will be at some point. But another thing I love about the show, and I would say this is kind of the surprise, star of the show, but we obviously saw this coming because of the trailers. But Uncle Owen being a complete badass, I love that. It's like, he has that scene that's being memed a lot. We gotta train Luke when he's ready. Oh, like you trained his father, and that's been memed so much. But it's such a great line. It's true, and it speaks a lot to A New Hope, because Uncle Owen was kind of in this. Very much the same character, where he wanted Luke to stay on the farm. He wasn't giving him the reason, of course, because he didn't want to tell him his dad was a genocidal maniac who now runs the entire galaxy. So he was like, no, you need to help with the farm. You need all these excuses, and Luke just wanted adventure and stuff like that. And now we're getting a lot more insight into that character, which I absolutely love. It just awesome. And then, just being badass, him, standing up, not fighting, but standing up to the Inquisitor, the third sister, and just being like, not, even though he obviously rather dislikes Obi-Wan at this point, probably thinks of him as a nuisance. He didn't give him away. He I love that line where he's just like, "Oh, you are you sheltering Jedi or something like that?" And he's like, "No, I hate the Jedi." And it's like, yeah, that's probably true. He probably does hate the Jedi, but he had the integrity to not give Obi-Wan away. I just love what they did with his character. I like that it matches what we saw of Uncle Owen in A New Hope, and I like that we're getting that motivation a little bit more fleshed out.
Yeah, I mean, 2 points on this. The line of dialogue that I liked the most in that scene was when, he speaks to Obi-Wan after the confrontation with the third sister, and Obi-Wan thanks him, and Uncle Owen says, "I didn't do it for you."
Yeah.
Right. And it's revealing. It's my second point, because in A New Hope, you don't really appreciate that, Uncle Owen, how deeply Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru really love Luke. Especially Uncle Owen just seems like this grumpy dad, and he kind of keeps Luke around, but he's trying to, keep him on the farm and not let him see the galaxy and whatnot. And he kind of gets a raw deal. Whereas, like, in reality, Uncle Owen was basically just like a good father figure who wanted what he thought was best for Luke. It wasn't about him trying to kill Luke's dreams or be the strict parent. Like, he wanted to protect him.
Yeah.
And I think that this portrayal of Owen just sort of reveals his depth as a character, whereas he was pretty one-dimensional in A New Hope. And he's really not in the prequels in a meaningful way. I mean, you do get to see him. He introduces his girlfriend Beru, but he's not like this real, he doesn't get a lot of dialogue. So I think we're going to see him again in this next episode. Maybe we'll actually, you talk about him being sort of badass. I mean, maybe we'll actually get to see him, in more of a combat role, considering that the third sister now has some sense of Luke's whereabouts. I think the story is coming back to Tatooine. So I don't know. Yeah, I think they did him really well. I mean, I think the next character, if we're going to go through character by character to discuss, is little Leia. I think she's great. She's a great actress. Very believable as a young Princess Leia. Sort of shows the kind of quick wit, inquisitiveness, ingenuity that young Anakin Skywalker showed in Phantom Menace, but is sort of less annoying, as a bit more charming. So I think that's amazing. I think there's obviously some plot holes here, right? Like, the third sister is this trained Jedi hunter who goes across the galaxy killing Force-sensitive people for arbitrary reasons, and can't tell that she's in a room with a literal Skywalker who is a midichlorian count that's off the charts. That seems a little fishy to me. But I think, her performance is great. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of her as Leia. I mean, even though she's a child, right? I mean, Carrie Fisher only passed away a few years ago. It's a tough role to recast, and I think that she's a kid, but I think she's being able to fill some really, really big shoes and do it well. And so I have a lot of good things to say about her performance.
Yeah, I agree, and it's so hard to get child actors, but I think she does she does a Carrie Fisher impression pretty well. That's what it comes down to, and yeah, real quick, your point about Uncle Owen being a badass and potentially being a combat role. I didn't even think of that. I did presume he would be back in the last episode, at least when they return, and he probably has a couple lines. But if he does do something combat wise, I hope it's more in the vein of like Alfred from Batman Begins, where it's like not really someone who's used to fighting, but someone's threatening someone he loves, so he'll do like something he'll surprise someone, a sucker punch or something like that, just to help the people who will actually have combat experience. I don't really expect him to start doing prequel era backflips and stuff like that, but some kind of badass moment where he puts himself on the line and probably gets backhanded because of it. I think that would be really, really cool to see, because it would once again reinforce that love for Luke, especially if it's Luke being threatened. And then your point about Leia, I think what really works for Leia is that she is also going on a bit of her own character development too. She's kind of softening a bit, and not in a bad way, in a more being more receptive to Obi-Wan and stuff like that. And the scene I absolutely just loved was when they were on the back of that transport with that worker who they find out is sympathetic towards the Empire. And they have that little scene where he's like, I wish I knew what my dad was like or my mom was like, and and then he asks, are you my dad or something along the lines, and Obi-Wan just goes, no, no, I wish I was though. It's like there is that that kind of recognition of Padme, yeah, you mentioned that she's very much like Anakin from the Phantom Menace, which is true. I kind of got that impression too, which I quite enjoyed. But I think Obi-Wan kind of recognizing Padme in her, and that Padme was also a very outspoken person and very very fierce and stuff like that, and you can just tell how sad it was making Obi-Wan to see someone because obviously Padme was the wife of Anakin, so they had that deeper connection, but they were all friends in the end. They all cared about each other, and for Obi-Wan, this is very much a spiritual journey where he's being reminded of aspects of his past that he probably was trying to block out. And I imagine the death of Padme is something he doesn't want to think about. And here's this girl, a little bit hopeful because this is the lineage of Padme continuing on, but also really sad that she doesn't get to raise her own daughter. She's never seen her own daughter except meeting right before she died during childbirth. So it's sad, but also hopeful. I thought it was a great scene.
I think, I think that, it's implied in the last season of Clone Wars that Obi-Wan sort of knew about Anakin and Padme and kind of turned his eye to it. And I mean, how could he not, right? Like, he spends every day with this guy, you know what I mean? At some level, he's going to figure out that he has a very close bond with the senator from Naboo. I think that, he kind of, watched these people grow up and was kind of like, dare I say, a sort of older brother figure to both Anakin and Padme. And he loved them. You know what I mean? I know the Jedi code forbids attachments, but it's very clear that Obi-Wan, he comes from the lineage of Qui-Gon and Dooku, these Jedi who, while they were deeply devoted to the code, were able to sort of bend it sometimes, right? I mean, let's not forget Obi-Wan, was deeply in love with Satine. Yeah. So he was always, this sort of, I mean, Obi-Wan's not a gray Jedi per se. It seemed like Qui-Gon was not a gray Jedi, but, they weren't afraid to question the wisdom of the council. I don't know. And it's just beautiful, because we all, I mean, growing up, I also loved Padme. I had a huge crush on her. And so
I still do.
To this day. And her death as perhaps not written as compelling as it could have been, the whole broken heart thing. It still hits really hard. Her funeral scene with Boss Nass and Jar Jar. So it's beautiful for Obi-Wan to get to spend some time with Leia, and especially because, I mean, I don't get the sense that he's getting to hang out with Luke all that much, No,
it doesn't seem like it, with one episode left. But yeah, the connection with Leia makes a lot more sense, because if he had a deep connection with Luke, it would make A New Hope seem a little bit weird.
Yeah, that's true.
Clone Wars definitely confirmed this, but the idea that Obi-Wan knew of their relationship, or at least assumed, was kind of hinted at in the prequels as well, because in Revenge of the Sith, when he's asking where Anakin went, he looks, at Padme, who's obviously really, really pregnant at that point, and he goes, he's the father, isn't he? So it's almost like this kind of pent-up truth that he had in him kind of comes out in that moment. And then I always, I kind of see Obi-Wan as almost like a devout Catholic. It's not that he's perfect, it's that he is a true believer.
Right. Right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, because also he didn't publicly challenge the council the way the council's wisdom the way Qui-Gon did.
No,
You
no,
know,
he was a rebel all the way
so
through.
he had such a special relationship with Anakin, and there's this sense that Anakin's the chosen one. That I feel like he was willing to kind of grant him a long leash, albeit perhaps too long of a leash, considering how well it turned out. I mean, one of my big takes in Star Wars has always been that Qui-Gon's death is what sort of sparked the whole thing. And that had Qui-Gon lived, Qui-Gon could have been the sort of father figure that Anakin needed. That could have sort of helped him as he was maturing and starting to question the Jedi teachings and kind of keep him in line. Whereas Obi-Wan, I mean, what does he say to him on Mustafar? He says, "You are my brother, Anakin. I loved you." He doesn't say, you were like a son to me. And I think Anakin really needed a father figure, and he obviously didn't get that with Watto. And I don't think, he really got that with Obi-Wan the way he needed, or the Jedi Order writ large.
Yeah, that kind of I didn't think of this before, but that kind of goes back to Uncle Owen. Luke, very similar to Anakin in a lot of ways, very rambunctious, very cares deeply about his friends to the point of his own detriment. But he did grow up with a father figure, and he did grow up with a good mom in the form of his aunt and uncle. There is kind of that nature versus nurture aspect to it, which is very interesting.
Would you say that growing up in a strong two-parent household was the determinative factor in Luke escaping the dark side?
Maybe not the determinant factor, but I think it helps. As you point out, having a good brother is a great thing, but having a mature, like an adult guide to your life and to help, I think helps a lot. And I think you're completely right. Liam Neeson would have provided that. Obi-Wan was very close to him. What was he, like 6 years older than Anakin? He was an adult in the Phantom Menace, but he was still really, really young. So
He's probably like in his late teens, I would guess.
I think they were more brothers than a parent kid relationship, or even a mentor Padawan relationship. They were very close together in that way, and then just add on the fact that that Liam Neeson's character was rebellious. That would have helped Anakin blow off some steam, I think, because I think he held a lot of stuff in that probably added to him eventually snapping. If that wasn't the case, and he had a mentor who was just like, you're human. Sometimes you make mistakes. Just do your best. Someone he wouldn't be afraid to confide in and actually talk to. I think that would have made a difference.
Right. Whereas with Obi-Wan, there's almost this dynamic of sibling rivalry in the relationship, right? Where it's sort of competitive. That's 10 times I have saved your life. Oh, no, no, no. It's really only 9 times that the business, it doesn't. A last quick take I'll drop on this is that it makes so much sense that Anakin would fall, but Luke wouldn't, because Anakin was literally groomed by Palpatine since childhood.
Yeah, that's another thing.
To join the dark side. Whereas like Luke was this rando kid who met 2 space wizards named Ben Kenobi and Yoda, who showed him how to do like magical things. And then his dad shows up in his life, and this guy's like in his early 20s, and his dad is on face evil. He basically just like, froze his buddy in this hulk of metal, and he's like, come join my evil, like weird cult religion. It's like, obviously I'm not going to do that, right? Whereas like Anakin like had been persuaded over time, that the Jedi were evil, right? And in fairness to him, he probably did deserve to be a master. He was right that there were things about the Force that the Jedi weren't telling him, and they didn't promote him to master because at some level, I think his suspicions were right that they didn't want him to see the secret Jedi archives. Like he wasn't incredibly off base. And I think in Anakin's fall, there's this, obviously this aspect of love for his wife. And, his wife is a sitting senator in the Republic. Palpatine, the Chancellor, is from her home planet. I think he, in some ways, was prioritizing his duties as a husband over his sort of clerical duties as a Jedi, which isn't, an unreasonable calculation. I just think he was so sort of confident in his abilities with the Force that he almost thought he could go, uncorrupted, were he to fall to the dark side. And it was clearly misplaced. And I think, part of the reason he lost to Kenobi on Mustafar is because he was so new to the dark side. He hadn't really been trained in the powers of the dark side. He didn't really know what he was doing. So he has access to all this power by going fully dark, but he doesn't really know how to wield it well. And he gets overconfident.
That's a good point. Well, we certainly covered a lot here. It's going to be interesting to see how the Kenobi series ends, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you for joining us, Joe, and I'll see all of you next time.